Once you are finished with the preferences, click the back arrow at the top left or the back button on your tablet to return to where you came from. In this case, we're on our home screen. On the home screen, we have 4 options for different modules we may want to visit. Projects is where we'll do the bulk of our data entry. Sampling plans is necessary if you're doing environmental monitoring or if you have large projects with multiple loggers who you want to have working on the same project. You should be using a sampling plan, and that is discussed in another video. Email logs is once you finish a borehole log and you want to email it to somebody, or if you want to send them a draft of a current boring that you're working on because you have problems in the field, you can use the email logs capabilities. Preview logs is where you can actually view the PDFs of the boring logs on the tablet itself, and it's the same log that's actually emailed off as well. Syncing is where you can upload data or download sampling plans and configurations, uploading photos, that sort of thing. And then managing photos is self-explanatory. Any photos that you take within pLog can be viewed there. And you can upload those separately through that module as well. So the purposes of this video, we're going to spend the bulk of our time during this in the Projects module. So if you tap on Projects, you'll then come to the Project screen, where you can see all the different projects you have on this tablet. If you tap at the list on the left, you will find all the different projects that are available that have already been logged. And the data that is available is shown on the right. So the list on the left is where you select from, and whatever data is present is shown on the right, or that's where you would do your data entry. To add a new project, you click the plus button, and you'll see that any required fields are indicated as required. So in this case, we have a project ID. All other fields are optional. Choose your English or imperial units or your metric units, depending on where you're located, what you need to be doing. If you didn't mean to create this project, you can always click the X and you can delete the project. Keep in mind that if you are deleting a project that you have logged boreholes in, that deleting that project will also delete all of the boreholes, samples, layers, etc. The other thing to point out on this screen is that you'll see that we have what's called a shortcut. And in this case, it's the hole shortcut, and it allows us to navigate to that holes module as well as see that we have recorded 28 boreholes on this particular project. So if I tap on holes, it will take us to the holes dashboard where you can see all the different holes that are available in this particular project. I've already started logging B16, and if I tap on it, you'll see that the numbers in the shortcuts on the right on my dashboard have updated. So I have 2 soil samples, a shear strength measurement, and 3 stratigraphy records at this point. If I want to create a new borehole, it's the same concept as creating a new project. I just click the plus button, and you'll see that it is pre-populated as B-. I'll type in B-17 just to show you how I would create a new borehole. Information about the hole that will repopulate, or any drop-down lists that have been selected previously, so counties, drilling companies, drill rigs, drilling methods, SPT, hammer types, coring methods, drilling fluids, drillers, hole types, that sort of thing. The things that you will need to do each time you do a new hole would be clicking on the calendar button to get the current date and time, and the location, whether you're using a text description and a location, using northern easting elevation, stations and offsets, or GPS with the locate, and you can click the button there to actually get your latitude and longitude directly from the tablet's GPS. I'll go ahead and save this, and then I return back to the whole dashboard. Note that data is always being saved, so you don't have to click that save button. You could have just as easily clicked the back arrow up here at the top, or your back button down at the bottom, and the same concept does apply. A couple other points to make here. The refusal info and termination info are also available for scenarios once you're finished logging the borehole and you want to input that information, or if you're doing a test pit or a trial pit, you can navigate to those modules. Okay, so now that we're back to the dashboard, let me go back to my B16 and we're going to continue logging there. So what you'll notice is that if I click on stratigraphy, it looks like we've drilled down to about 12 feet so far. I have an asphalt layer, I have some soil that's a poorly graded sand with clay, and then I have a lean clay with sand. So I've got 3 different layers. I'll also have 2 different soil samples. I have one that was from 5 to 6, that was a grab sample, and one that's from 10 to 11.5, which is an SPT sample. So if I tap on each of those, I will see that the data on the right panel changes. Once again, to add a new sample, I click the plus button. In this case, I'm going to do a new SPT sample. So I'm going to call that S3, and I'm going to use my depth auto increment to automatically populate this. So you may recall that the default depth interval for my SPT was set as 2.5 feet. So if you're sampling every 2.5 feet in the top 10 feet and then going every 5 feet after that, then that would mimic this sort of scenario where I can just click the plus button once, and that increments 2.5 feet. I click it twice, it increments another 2.5 feet, so 5 feet. I can then type in my blow counts, 3, 5, 6, and 8. Looks like I'm using 4 intervals. And I can put in my recovery length, and I'm going to say that maybe I recovered 20 out of 24 inches. If I want to do any environmental types of measurements like PIDs, FIDs, that sort of thing, I could do that. And in this case, there are a lot of additional fields shown that I may or may not need. I'm just going to fill in the ones that most people typically need: a test type, a value, and a units. Click the back arrow, and I'm back to my SPT sample. If I was doing a more traditional geotechnical project where I wanted to record a shear strength measurement like a pocket pan or a tor vein, I could do that as well. So maybe I had a vein peak of 2, a vein remolded was 1.25, and a pocket pan was also 2. If I wanted to take a photo of my sample, I could click on the photo button. And in this case, you will actually get my smiling face. And now I'm going to describe that material. In this case, I'm going to do a soil layer. So I'm going to do a new layer. There's 3 types of layers within pLog. I have a surface layer, a soil layer, and a rock layer. And then if you've already described the material, you can always copy an existing soil layer or copy a rock layer and describe that. In this case, I'm going to do a new soil layer. So maybe I don't know my bottom depth yet, and I'm going to fill in some very complex options just to show the extent of what is available. And keep in mind that your tablet configuration may look different than what I'm showing here. So any 7 options for describing color, dark brownish gray to light blackish gray. If you wanted to have a dark gray to light brown or something like that, you could do that as well. Just choose the relevant options from your list here. In this particular configuration, it's modeling a USCS classification. So if I said that I have maybe let's say I've hit an MH layer, and so I say it's a silt, and because it's an MH, it could be some of these options. So the tablet has filtered the options for relevant soil descriptions. It is also, because it is a fine grained material, it is also going to filter my consistency list as well. I'm not going to fill in the consistency because I'm going to let the software actually populate that by itself. If you want to fill in other information, maximum grain size, plasticity, etc., you can certainly do that. Your minor constituents, maybe we have a trace of some manganese, and maybe we have a trace of something else. Not sure what. Let's say we've got some mica. And then lastly, because we don't know all the possible options that people may encounter in the field, there is an other option in minor constituents and various other lists within the system. So you can type in something else. And if I want to indicate it was stratified, and that maybe I'm in residuum, and lastly, the comments field. So you can fill in, you can type essentially to your heart's content. Some other description goes here. Lastly, you have line types and graphics, and depending on which software you're using and what it is that you're trying to do, typically your line type and graphic are optional. In some cases, graphic is necessary. However, in many cases, just choosing your USCS classification will give you a graphic that is relevant. But you can come in and choose, if you wanted to indicate it was an MH or something, you can choose that graphic. I'm not going to in this scenario. Okay, so I've now logged a layer. I don't know where it ends because we haven't seen the layer change yet. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to do another soil sample. Do a new SPT, call it S4. And once again, I'm going to click the plus button twice to increment my 5 feet and type in my blow counts, 4, 8, 12, and 16. And we'll say my recovery length in this scenario was 15 inches. For the sake of the demo, I'm going to skip the environmental measurements and pocket pens, but you can certainly do those. And let's then jump back over to stratigraphy. So what you'll often find is that people are doing samples, and then as soon as they know what the description is, because the material has changed, they will switch to stratigraphy. In this scenario, I'm going to click the plus button to add a new layer. And maybe I'm going to say at 21 feet, when we open up that split spoon, that we saw that it had changed quite significantly, and maybe it went to a fat clay. I'm going to say it's a dark gray, say it's a CH, and it is a fat clay with sand. Say it's, we're going to leave that one blank as well. And maybe we had a trace of some chert. And once again, we are in residuum. So all of these options are, you can pick and choose which are relevant for you. You do not have to select from each drop-down list. It will not adversely affect your description. So I've got my soil layer at 21. And you'll notice that it's going to ask me, would I like to set my bottom depth in my previous layer using the depth from the current layer? So from 12 to 21 feet. If I say yes, it will then post-populate that. So now I see I have a layer from 12 to 21. And in this scenario, I want the software to actually calculate the consistency. So I can come back, and because I had not filled in consistency values before, because I didn't know what range of N values I was going to have, you'll see that as soon as I come back here, it is now populated that is classified as stiff to very stiff, based on those SPT N values. Okay, very good. So I'm going to go back to my samples, and I'm going to do a thin wall sample. So in this case, I'm going to call this T5, and I'm going to say it was from 23 to, in this case, it looks like I'm doing a 48-inch sample. So we're going to say from 23 to 27 feet. You can choose your relevant sampler type, whatever it happens to be, and you can indicate your recovery length. In this example, this is probably a geoprobe, but we'll run with this example since I don't have a particular geoprobe graphic. Once again, you can take a photo, you can do environmental measurements like your PIDs, do your shear strength, pocket pens, and torr vanes, or you can describe your material. In this case, I'm going to do another type of sample. Let's do another SPT sample, and let's say this is S6, and it's going to go from 28 to some other depth. If you have a scenario where you hit refusal in your SPT samples, all you need to do is change to 50 blows and change your penetration, whatever it happens to be, 3 inches in this case. You'll notice that the N value has now updated as well. You can do that in any of the different intervals. The scenario for using text is when you have weight of hammer or weight of rod. Sometimes organizations like to use WOR and WOH. However, we generally recommend you use 0 because it makes your calculations and usage of the data simpler. But that is your discretion. All right, so we had, let's say we recovered 12 inches, and now we have finished logging our SPT. So we're going to jump back over to stratigraphy, and now you'll see we're going to do a new soil layer, and we're going to say from, let's say this was from 26 to 30 feet, and we can fill in dark gray. Say it's a let's say it's an SM. Because it's an SM, we get these options: silty sand or silty sand with gravel, and it's very dense. So you'll notice, because I filled in the bottom depth already, it looked for my in values, determined the min and max range, and set them appropriately. So keep in mind that what I'm showing is just an example description. Your description options may vary quite significantly, but the process is identical. It's once again going to ask me if I would like to set the bottom depth of the previous layer. I'm going to say yes. So there you go. I have now finished logging another soil layer. If I wanted to copy a soil layer, essentially, maybe let's say I encountered some material, again, that I'd already described, whether it was in this borehole or another borehole. I can choose copy soil layer. I can change to different boreholes, and you'll see I have various options. And I can then copy them. In this scenario, I'm just going to copy that 0.5 to 5 as an example. So I will copy that, and I'm going to say from 30 to 34 feet, I had this material. You'll notice that everything that was selected in that original layer has been pre-populated for me automatically. So copying is very useful whether it's in the current hole or in another hole. Okay, so we've done a lot of logging of soil at this point. I'm going to go back to my holes dashboard, and maybe I'm going to record a water level. So maybe we encountered water somewhere around 29 feet, and I wanted to indicate that. So I'm going to say at time of drilling, I have a water depth that was at 29.5 feet, and click the date and time. If I had a scenario where I wanted to indicate that the water level was not encountered, I could go to my notes and I could choose not encountered. In this scenario, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so we've done some logging. Let's go to our notes module. If there's something unusual during drilling that you want to record, but maybe it's not going to appear on your boring log, or maybe it's going to be in a separate column because it's not something related to your soil and rock descriptions, you could say, let's say it was actually at 28 feet, maybe we had some rough drilling. So you could do that. Specify a depth, potentially a bottom depth, and a description. And once again, you'll notice there is the other option there, so you can indicate that. Hopefully we didn't lose the core barrel down the hole, because that might ruin our day. Certainly slow down production. Okay, so we've done everything related to soil. Let's move on and go into rock coring. So our last soil layer ended at 34 feet, and let's say maybe we started rock coring at that point. So I'm going to do a rock sample. Once again, create a new rock core. I'm going to say from 34 to, oops, I always forget I have to do that. Tap in the field first, then click the plus button so that it actually will save your depth measurement. What you're noticing is that as soon as you move from one field to the other, it actually does save that value. And so that's why you can't click the plus button until you've actually moved to a separate field. Call this R1, and maybe out of the 60 inches I had 50 inches of recovery and 40 inches of RQD. Once again, you can take the photo of the sample if you would like. And if you wanted to do an advancement rate where you're actually timing how fast you're coring, you can certainly do that, but I'm not going to demonstrate that here. Now I'm going to go back to stratigraphy, and I'm going to do a rock layer. So I'm going to say that that entire core run was the same material. In this scenario, I've chosen that it's a dark gray. We'll say it's a limestone. The rock types are actually ordered alphabetically within each type of rock. So if you have igneous, or you have sedimentary, or you have metamorphic, all grouped together. You can order these lists however you would like in your pLog configuration. So I'm going to say it's limestone and it's freshly to slightly weathered. Maybe it's very hard to very hard. Maybe it's coarse-grained, oops, not coarse-grained, coarsely crystalline to finely crystalline. Maybe we have very thickly to thickly bedded, cross-bedded, inter-bedded, whatever it is that you need there. Very wide fracture spacing, 0-degree bedding angle. Maybe we have some iron oxide staining. And once again, you have some comments that you can type in. And then you have your line type in your graphic. The rock type will typically populate the graphic itself. However, in some people's configurations, they do have to choose a graphic. But most people, it's not necessary. Okay, so we've now logged a rock layer, and we are ready to go back to our holes dashboard. So there's two more things I'm going to cover before we finalize this boring log, and then we will upload our data. The first thing is I'm going to go to a location visit. So this module is particularly useful for people who want to record photographs before and after they drill a borehole. And I haven't shown you a before photo, but I'll just demo an after photo. So if you go to the location visit module, you can create a new record, and I am going to be John Cunningham. I choose my notes. I can click photo and I can take a photo. I can indicate the weather, and I can indicate when we departed the site or when we left that particular borehole. Alright, so I'll take another picture of me. I don't look too much different than before. Move that back over. I'm not sure why it always does that. So there you get another photo of me. And lastly, I'm going to come back and I'm going to edit my borehole. And I'm going to indicate, well, maybe I had refusal. Maybe it wasn't at 30 feet. Maybe it was at 34 feet. And my refusal date and time. And then lastly, I'm going to terminate the borehole. And it was not at 40 like I had thought it might be. I'm going to say it was at 39. And it was terminated at the target depth. And if you want to indicate how you backfilled it, you can choose from the backfill method and specify the backfill date and time. Another important point to make is that there are certain lists that have this pencil button where you can actually edit the list on the tablet. This is kind of like a get out of jail free card where you can edit the values in the list. However, the next time you sync the tablet, those list values will be removed. So if it's a permanent change to the configuration, it should be made in the pLog configuration tool and uploaded to your cloud account. But if you have something in the field that you really need to record, then you can go in and edit that. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go back to my home page, and I am going to click the sync button. So you have 4 options for the synchronization process. 1 is uploading field data. 2 is downloading sampling plans, uploading photos, and downloading interface XML. So uploading field data is any data you collect in the field in the projects module or the sampling plans module. Downloading sampling plans is if you've been assigned a project that you need to get loaded onto the tablet, you can do that. Uploading photos is pretty self-explanatory. We don't recommend uploading photos over your cellular connection unless you have large data plans, because you can quickly burn through lots of data. We've seen clients upload 900 photos for a single project, which is about 1.5 gigs of data. We don't recommend doing that because it can take a while. And then lastly, the downloading interface XML is your configuration file for the tablet. The drop-down list values, what's shown on the forms, what things are called, and you can choose whether you want to do that or not. In this case, I'm going to leave all of them selected and click sync. With that completes the tutorial on logging a borehole on the tablet.